One of the outcomes of constant organizational change is going to be stress on the individuals employed within it. Our definition of stress is an adaptive response to a challenge or threat to well-being. What we mean by adaptive is, of course, it's an attempt to adapt. And in general, this is simply based on a basic fight or flight readiness that is evolutionarily appropriate, but maybe not quite so appropriate in today's environment. Some things about stress that we should know. First of all, it is pervasive. We see changes every day. We have to deal with them. There are plenty of episodes in people's lives that create change, irrespective of what's going on at their job. So we know that stress is all around us. What there are is a lot of individual differences in terms of response. So what might be very stressful to one person is not necessarily going to be very stressful to another. Stress is also not necessarily a bad thing because it gives us cues to the environmental change that's going on around us. That is, we're trying to do something that we've always done, and all of a sudden it's not working, and that tells us to check the environment. So this produces some motivation and learning, and of course, in some cases, significantly better response. But we need to think a little bit about that before we suggest that stress is always a good thing. Cognitive appraisal theory tells us how stress is created. That is, it is all about what people believe, see, feel. It is all about the individual differences as opposed to what is actually going on in the organization. So it's a two-stage process. There's the primary appraisal, in which an event is evaluated in terms of being a positive or negative thing, in terms of whether I can like it or not. That's not necessarily going to tell me whether I'm stressed out by it or not. So getting word of a promotion, I might think, oh, that's a wonderful thing. I'm going to get paid more. It's more challenging. It's more exciting. It's more status, and it's more power. But in fact, I also might be wondering, gee, it's going to take up an awful lot of my time. I don't know if I really like leaving the job that I have right now, that kind of thing. So the nature of the primary appraisal is all about what the person wants, right? It's not about what the, some sort of objective nature of the demand. The secondary appraisal is about my ability to cope. And again, using the same example, I may feel that I have the ability to cope with a bigger job, or I may feel that this is going to be beyond me and I have to take it because I need the money, and oh my God, what am I going to do? One of the things that people have looked at in stress research is whether it's really about the big events in people's lives that stress them out so much, or whether it's the daily grind that many of us have to go through. So there is an events kind of measure of stress that suggests that you get certain numbers of points in terms of whether you've gotten married that year, you got divorced, you've had a death in the family, you've had job loss, gone to jail, all sorts of things that might create stress. And we can all agree that those things are stressful. On the other hand, people often look at the daily grind. That is, every day I work 12 hours, every day my work environment is dirty and I don't like my colleagues. Every day I have too much work to do. Every day I really don't have anything to do, and I'm worried about that too. That doesn't provide me with stimulation. I commute a couple hours every day. What does that do? None of those things in and of themselves on one day would really be an issue, but when they happen over and over and over again in sufficient quantity, perhaps it's going to be a little bit more of a problem than some of these event type things, which we actually do go through some sort of grieving process and get over. So research actually suggests that to the extent that that daily grind goes on and on and on, it actually can have a bigger impact, not in the short term, but in the longer term. So if we get married, we adjust to that. If we get divorced, we adjust to that. If somebody dies that we're close to, we also adjust to that. All of those things are difficult, but we come to a new level of ability to cope, ability to adapt. With the daily grind, it's really hard to ever find that new float level if what's going on is just a little bit too much for you. One of the most important influences on stress in workplaces is about personality and people's ability to cope. We know that people who score high on neuroticism on the big five are less likely to be able to cope with stress in the work environment. Personality also copes in terms of, personality also combines with the situation in order to produce a response. So if I'm a very dependent person, for example, my response to stress is going to be to run to somebody, a coworker, and say, "Oh gosh, I can't cope with this. What am I going to do?" And the person is probably going to say something like, "Well, I'll help you with it." Or if I'm a very aggressive, assertive personality, my response to stress may be to, try and knock somebody down in the parking lot just because I'm mad about what's going on at work. So how people manifest their stress is going to actually differ as well based on their personality. Stress and performance, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this idea, right? So if there is no stress in our lives whatsoever, there really is not a whole lot of reason to get out of bed, which makes performance extremely low. As stress increases, we are able to cope with it. We start doing more because we have to. The environment is demanding something of us. It's something that we think we can cope with, and we increase our performance. At some level, the stress is going to get to be too much. At some level, we're going to stop feeling like we can cope with it all the time. And we're going to go down the right-hand side of that slope toward burnout. Wherever people's pinnacle in terms of performance is, it's always based on their personality, their capabilities, and how they see the situation. So that performance peak is going to be different for different people. But we do know that very, very low stress and very, very high stress are going to produce limited performance. And that's something, of course, that we want to manage in the workplace. We want to provide people with enough demands so that they are performing. And then on the backside, we want to make sure that we don't demand too much such that they burn out or start making a great deal of mistakes or create a safety hazard, etc. So within the workplace, do you want your people to be super stressed? Of course not. Are there times when that's going to happen? Probably. We see in factories in South Carolina right now that people are adding shifts, and that's sometimes not a very comfortable thing to be going on, right? So it means, of course, that management has to work more. But we want to look for some tools to manage stress in the workplace, and people can do that as individuals in terms of looking within and looking for things that help us with our stress. And we all know some of those things that we like best that might help us with our stress. For some people, it's going to the bars. For some people, it's going to sit down in front of the TV and watch some mindless drivel for a while. But for the workplace, what we want to be able to do is a few things. If we can't provide people facilities, we might want to provide them with opportunities for some healthy living. So having people allowed enough time so that they can go out and get a walk at lunchtime or something like that might actually be very helpful. If we make sure that we're very clear about how we're steering this, it's going to help people think about healthier living, which helps, of course, reduce stress. We want to be responsive when an employee has problems. We don't want to say, just suck it up. It's not my job to care about you not being able to get your work done. Well, it is, because perhaps you didn't calibrate the workload correctly. We want to balance those workloads so that we're at the right place on that stress diagram we just showed. And we want to be supportive. Everybody has stress, and having a support network, a social support network, can be helpful. You can be part of that as an employer. You don't want to really be the source of all the problems. You want to be somebody who's trying to help. And one way to do that, of course, is being supportive and responsive when people are having problems getting their work done.